Fred Hartman was the founder of Community Access. He had a sister who had mental health condition and was a patient at Manhattan Psychiatric Center and would be discharged and then readmitted. And Fred eventually joined the Board of Visitors, was the president of the Board of Visitors at Manhattan Psychiatric Center. He was also an activist, and when he saw what was happening to discharged patients into the community, he was inspired to say to actually create a housing alternative. And so he recruited some of his friends, he recruited his accountant, his lawyer, the hospital president, a guy named John Talbot, elected officials, and formed a board of directors, which also included 2 ex-patients. And they pooled $800 and went to a tenant-run building on Avenue C in the Lower East Side. And the tenant association agreed to rent 3 apartments to Community Access in exchange for fixing up the apartments. The hospital donated furniture, and the staff of the hospital brought it out and set up the apartments. And then Community Access subletted the units to former patients. Over time, they heard about vacant apartments in another 2 buildings on Stanton Street and started renting apartments from the landlord in that building. And it soon became apparent that the landlord wasn't keeping up the building, and in fact wasn't paying taxes. And the buildings were on the verge of being taken by the city. And each building had 22 apartments, so there was 44 apartments, and it was a mix of tenants. And so the Community Access tenants all went on rent strike and negotiated then with the landlord to buy the buildings for $5,000, which was the value of the oil in the fuel tank. In 1977, Community Access was able to buy these 2 tenement buildings at 208 and 210 Stanton Street, and inherited 44 apartments, and about half of the units were already occupied by mostly families from Puerto Rico, and the neighborhood was mostly vacant lots. When Community Access took over, they started repairing the buildings and started renting more apartments to the Community Access tenants, but also maintain the housing for the families. So it was really quite by accident, but quite significantly, it was a integrated housing model that worked really well. And everybody, all the Community Access tenants paid their own rent. The rent was like $60 a month. They paid their own utilities. We provided the heat, was included. Some tenants had studio apartments, some tenants shared. People had a choice of who they lived with. So there's a lot of elements in the model that were very organic in terms of how they came about, but it worked. I became involved after our student team had visited. I went back to Fred Hartman and the board and asked if I could be an intern for the summer. So I started on like July 2nd or 3rd in 1979. 2 of the tenants had been supers in buildings and had construction experience. I had my grandfathers were carpenters, so I could hang a door, I could do some things, but I had never seen a tar roof because I'm from California, but one of the tenants did. I taught them how to hang sheetrock and paint and plaster, and we slowly started to improve the building. So it was really a team kind of partnership between Community Access and the tenants. And the buildings were eventually taken by the city for a long-planned urban renewal project. We had to go out to the private real estate market and rent apartments, and it was very difficult to do. Landlords did not want to rent apartments to a mental health agency. We got a few breaks along the way, but the concept of developing housing was really sort of part of our DNA, I think, at that point. And we put some proposals together, but there was no financing, trying to think about ways to do this. What we managed to do in the 1980s was like group homes, because that's what the Office of Mental Health or the state was willing to fund. The opportunity to build affordable housing didn't really happen until 1990, when the state and the city agreed with the New York campaign and the provision of tax credits through the federal government, that you could begin to imagine how you could put all the pieces together and build housing. Betty Froelich. She joined the board of directors, and she was a wonderful person and warm, generous to me personally and to whatever the agency needed. We were really partners for several years, strategic planning and fundraising and so forth.